Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the notoriously sanctimonious RMB, on this, the 175th episode of Robservations, a show about something. 175 episodes. I can't believe we've done 175 of these. I can't believe the Post-Geek Singularity community is growing day by day, sometimes more than other days, but people are slowly coming in. People sometimes are trickling in. Sometimes they come in a waterfall of folks. Either way, it's great. The community we're building here is great. I can't believe we're going to be at episode 200 soon. Wow, my little experiment seems to be going strong. I want to thank everybody for that. As you know, Robservations is a show about something brought to you by me and also brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. If you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity, you get 20% off your order. I want to thank all of you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, for being here. For those of you who keep up on these things, today is, of course, the first day of Comic-Con, and a fairly new tradition in Comic-Con tonight is what's called Preview Night. This was something they implemented, I don't remember the exact Comic-Con, but sometime in the last decade, they implemented Preview Night where normally Comic-Con ran Thursday through Sunday. They added Wednesday night so people could go in on the floor and, kill each other over the exclusives that they sell, and it's always fun. I will not be there for Preview Night tonight. A lot of the time I do go to Preview Night. Tonight I am not. Boo-hoo. I hope that the Hot Toys Sith Trooper is still there tomorrow. If not, I'll have to get it on the secondary market, I suppose. I used to for Comic-Con, I used to have to spend, well, not have to, but I saved up my shekels, and I would spend thousands of dollars at Comic-Con on things. I've sort of curtailed that in the last couple of years, mostly because I don't have a lot of money to spend at Comic-Con anymore. And also lodging has skyrocketed, and like everything else, it's very expensive to go to Comic-Con. But I figured, it was funny. Willow Yang on today's John Campea show asked about memories of Comic-Con. And I'm like, why don't I make that the topic of today's chat? I would discuss Comic-Con and what it means to me and how I've watched it change and grow over the years, and what it really means to, I think, pop culture in general. Now, I have to say that my first Comic-Con was, in fact, 31 years ago. When I first moved to Los Angeles, because I was waiting to go to become a student at USC. Comic-Con used to be more in August. Now it's mostly in mid-July or late July. It used to be more late July. Now it's mid-July. But my first Comic-Con, I'd always wanted to go to Comic-Con, was in 1988. I just turned 21, and I lived here in LA, and I didn't have a lot of friends here yet. But I packed up my car and drove down to San Diego. It's only a 2.5 hour drive when there's no traffic. And I went to my first Comic-Con. And my big purchase at Comic-Con that year was a Japanese import Laserdisc of Akira. I think I'd read about Akira in Starlog magazine. I was obviously a fan of anime. I was a fan of Space Battleship Yamato and Dougram and Gundam and Macross / Robotech. And I'd heard about Akira, and it was funny. That was my big purchase, and it was expensive. Japanese import Laserdiscs were like $100 back then. So I bought that disc. It was a double disc set. Took it home, and I was blown away by Akira, actually. And of course, there was no English subtitles, so I didn't know what was being said. Later on, when I finally got to USC, my roommate then, John Parkan, and I kidnapped a Japanese exchange student. Now, we didn't kidnap him. We asked him to come, and we basically took us 6 hours to get through the movie because every time somebody spoke, we had to ask him to translate. It was pretty funny. I bet he thought we were absolutely out of our minds. But that was my first time I attended Comic-Con. And back then, I think the attendance was like 3,000 people. And there were panel rooms. It was at an old hotel in downtown San Diego. And the dealer's room looked like dealer's rooms, full of long boxes of comics. It was not yet a media savvy convention. There wasn't a huge media component to it because Tim Burton's Batman hadn't even come out. And in the 80s, of course, there wasn't a lot of superheroic films. There was a lot of science fiction. So there was certainly a science fiction component to Comic-Con, movies and TV and things like that. But it certainly wasn't, it didn't dominate. It still looked like your typical Saturday Night Live get a life sketch convention. And what was really interesting was it started to grow in the early 90s. And there were two things that I think really contributed to, in my mind, how I noticed Comic-Con exploding. And I think that the year that I really noticed the explosion, the real change, was in 1994. And in 94, I was working for Full Moon Entertainment, Charlie Band's Full Moon Entertainment. I had edited, along with Peter Billingsley, Don't Shoot Your Eye Out, Kid. I had edited re-edited Charlie Band's movie Arcade, which was a direct-to-video movie that came out in 1993. It was my first feature editing job. I've talked about that before. Basically, my friend Dan Schweiger hired me and brought back Peter Billingsley, who was actually in the movie and was the assistant editor. And the film had sat on a shelf and it remained unfinished for years. And they owed it to Paramount. So Dan hired me and brought back Peter. And all we were supposed to do was reconstitute the movie the way it was originally edited and then drop in the new effects. But, I called Dan after looking at the footage. I said, Dan, they edited this movie in 7 days. It's terrible. Let's re-edit the film. And Dan was like, well, what do you know about editing? I was like, I don't know. I got an A in editing at USC. I've been editing music videos and short films and Super 8 things all my life. I know a little something about editing. I just never cut a feature. So they allowed us to cut 10 minutes of it. And after they looked at the 10 minutes, they said, okay, you guys go. And Peter Billingsley and I spent a long time recutting Arcade. And one of the great things about it was we were able to reuse footage over and over again because it was about a video game that sucks kids into the video game world. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. And so I became pretty much on staff at Full Moon. Once I finished that project, I went on and was hired full-time, and I worked in promotions. And for the 94 Comic-Con, Charlie Band, Full Moon had a huge booth. So that was fun. The media started to really take over. But the biggest thing that had happened at Comic-Con 1994 was Image Comics. And the Image Comics team, famously, they had people like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and Jim Valentino and Todd McFarlane. They had all defected, Whilce Portacio. They had all defected from Marvel en masse, sort of. Their biggest stars left because back in the day, comic books were selling millions of copies a month. And then they formed Image Comics, this creator-owned label. And basically, between Spawn and Youngblood and Wildcats and all the things the Image guys were doing, Shadowhawk, they were selling millions of copies of each book a month. So they were literally like rock stars. And that was the year that Rob Liefeld had an entire spaceship built, a Youngblood spaceship, and the show had just exploded. And there's a media component to it. It was getting bigger every year. Post Tim Burton's Batman, that was of course the year The Crow had come out, and there was a lot going on. I mean, it was a slow trajectory, but you had things happening like anime was becoming big in America. Things like Sailor Moon were bringing in more of the female audience. Video games were growing. So Comic-Con had morphed from really being a comic book convention. It was definitely it was hit with, if you want to call it gamma radiation or you want to call it the mutant, the X gene. Comic-Con was mutating and it was becoming a behemoth, well on the way to the behemoth it now is today. It was still manageable. You could still, walk around. There were no lines to get into panels, and the convention center hadn't yet built the addition where Hall H is, where they now can seat 7,000 people to watch these gigantic panels of Hollywood actors and filmmakers. And this is where it really began. It was like the roller coaster, and now we were just cresting the top of the hill, and we were about to plunge down into the oblivion that Comic-Con has become. But it was interesting. That 94 Comic-Con was a watershed moment for me personally for a number of reasons. Not only was I working at Full Moon before it imploded, so we were at the top of our game. I had a movie that I'd worked as an editor on, a lot of good projects. I was developing some things there. I was working with my friends Dan Schweiger and Dan Schweiger, who later was in Free Enterprise playing himself, and of course Dave Parker. We had dinners. Charlie Band was doing a comic line, so we had a huge dinner. And at this dinner that we're all sitting around the table with, there was probably 20 people maybe. Harlan Ellison was at this dinner. Marv Wolfman was at this dinner. It was just amazing. And I remember I kind of got into it. I kind of mixed it up with Harlan Ellison a little bit, which was kind of cool. I mean, it was an amazing time. I met this girl, Tanya Brinza. I had a meet cute with a girl that I dated who later was loosely the inspiration for the Claire character in Free Enterprise. It was interesting that I never thought of Comic-Con as a place to meet girls. Now, of course, it certainly is, but back then it was not. But most importantly, I think what happened was I met Mark Altman. Now, Mark Altman, I had been a huge fan of from his work that he had done on Cinefantastique, all the 100-page year-end issues that he would write, reassessing the whole, or reviewing every episode of Next Generation, reassessing the season. So I met him and his crew from Sci-Fi Universe magazine. And I had known Chris Gore, but Chris Gore was part of that crew. And then a lot of the writers, people that have been my friends ever since, like Jeff Bond. And Full Moon was having a screening of their movie Oblivion. And Sci-Fi Universe was co-sponsoring it. And the buses never showed up to take the people from the convention center to the actual theater. So Peter David, who had written Oblivion, was there, and he was doing live readings from his Hulk comic books as we were trying to get people to get over to the screening. And I sort of bonded with all those people. So sort of my crew and Mark Altman's crew, we all melded and became fast friends. And of course, it was that meeting that eventually led to us teaming up. And I went to work on Sci-Fi Universe magazine. I became the critic at large, and Mark and I became fast friends. And fast forward to in the 4-year interim between Comic-Con 94 and Comic-Con 98, we did a lot of things. And we put on Sci-Fi Kids Day at the MGM Grand Hotel after I met my biological mother. We put on the Sci-Fi Universe Awards for 2 years. It was amazing. I mean, it was an amazing time in the mid-90s, and Comic-Con just kept growing and getting bigger. And I mean, it was an incredible thing. And what was really interesting about Comic-Con is once we had Sci-Fi Universe going, I started speaking at Comic-Con and doing panels. I'm on 4 panels at Comic-Con this year. So I've been speaking on, I've hosted panels in Hall H. When we were making Superman Returns, we did a whole video, one of Brian's blogs, about coming to Comic-Con. So Mike Doherty, who recently wrote and directed Godzilla King of the Monsters, Mike Doherty, Bryan Singer, myself, Todd Stanley, who was working with me, we all came from Sydney to Comic-Con, and we were the first people to present high definition or big digital images, high definition digital images inside Hall H in 2005 when Hall H was new. And we brought everybody from the film out there, and it was amazing. My friend Ashley Miller, who wrote Thor and X-Men First Class, we once commandeered Bryan Singer's limousine, and Ashley Miller impersonated Bryan Singer because he kind of looks like Bryan at Comic-Con. Comic-Con is a place I could tell stories till the cows come home. But what's really interesting about how Comic-Con has morphed and evolved, it's really become a celebration of pop culture. Everything is at Comic-Con now. There are video game companies. There's animation companies. Of course, the comics are still there, but they've sort of been a little squeezed out. There are toy companies. There's film companies, the TV shows, everything you want, streaming services, technology companies. It's really become ground zero of pop culture for the year. Now, the Comic-Cons, there are other great Comic-Cons around the world. I haven't been to the Comic-Con in Brazil, but I hear it's ginormous and amazing. I think it rivals Comic-Con. Of course, New York Comic-Con in the last couple of years has become gigantic as well. There's other pretty big Comic-Cons around the country. The Emerald City Comic-Con in my hometown of Seattle has gotten big, but there's something about San Diego. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the location. The convention center is right across from an inlet to the ocean. It's right on the coast. there in San Diego. You've got beautiful San Diego itself. The weather is always incredible. Sometimes it's a little hot. The weather is incredible. You've got the gas lamp district in San Diego where the food is amazing. And the best thing, though, about Comic-Con, you can meet anybody, any person that you want. You can basically get to them. They're accessible. The stars are a little difficult if you want to meet people that are on your favorite shows or movies, because they're kind of whisked in and whisked out. And things that have happened, like there's a lot of companies now that are putting on big parties. Before, in the 90s, you could just go to whatever Comic-Con party you wanted to. Now everybody scrambles to get into parties. My favorite place over the last decade to hang out was the Wired Cafe. The Wired Cafe was a thing at the Omni Hotel that first was very exclusive. You kind of had to know it was there. You still had to know it was there, but Wired magazine would sponsor. It's out on the deck at the Omni Hotel, and you had to have a pass to get in. But it was the place where everybody passed through the Wired Cafe. I don't know. Maybe they kept me out of it this year, but I think there is no Wired Cafe this year. The great thing about the Wired Cafe was free booze. One year when Game of Thrones was sponsoring the Wired Cafe, that they had all their drinks were Jameson, and they had these Game of Thrones drinks. So I made friends with the bartenders, and I always have flasks at Comic-Con with liquor in them. So I was literally going back and forth to the Wired Cafe, just filling up my flasks and with free Jameson, which when you're at Comic-Con can be costly. So it was great to have a place, and everybody went through all the celebrities, all the comic book personalities you want to meet, actors, everybody who knew what was up was going through the Wired Cafe. It was great. But I don't think it's there this year, unfortunately. They probably looked at the spreadsheet and said, it's a little too expensive. But I think the best thing about Comic-Con, the thing that I love the most about Comic-Con, is just the people. Now when I first went to Comic-Con, as I said, it was mostly like, dudes, sweaties, as John Schnepp used to call us all, walking around like, hey, going through the long boxes looking for your missing issue of Commandy, whatever. That's what it was. Now Comic-Con is a family affair. There's girls, there's boys, there's old men, there's old women, there's whole families, multi-generations of everyone. People are cosplaying. Comic-Con, if there's anything, maybe I think the whole idea of the post-geek singularity that I had came out of the explosion that I've seen, that I've witnessed, this slow explosion of geek interests, nerd interests. It wasn't just at first, of course, communications. The computer revolutionized everything, but the tech world had been, for the most part, away from the genre community. It was obviously adjacent to it, but it was never a part of it. Now, it's, of course, everything is completely integrated, and the tech industry overshadows us all. But what was really interesting is the post-geek singularity. I watched that slow explosion throughout the 90s. And from 88, when I first went, all throughout the 90s, all of this stuff just exploded. And by the 2000s, you saw a complete seismic demographic shift in Comic-Con. Everybody went. Nobody was excluded. Everybody loved this stuff. Every single person, nobody was no longer geek. Everybody had some kind of geek interests. The people that weren't geeks aged out, and it was a fantastic place to hang out. It still is. And you go down there and you see people you haven't seen in a long time. The only problem with Comic-Con now is it's so massive. It's spilled out of the convention center and into the city streets, literally, that there's a lot of people that you don't ever wind up seeing that I used to see all the time. Like everybody used to gather at the Marriott Marina Hotel. Most people stayed there that I knew, and everybody would hang out at the bars. But now it's too expensive. There's a bunch of different new hotels, and people are all over the place. So unfortunately, it's hard to just run into people the way we used to run into people. And that's what Comic-Con's all about. You'd wind up in these late night conversations, and crazy things would happen. And it was a lot of fun. But of course, as you get older and everybody sort of settles down and gets married, now people have kids and bring their kids. It's turned into it's sort of a different, more of a lower key experience than it was when I was in my, of course, early 20s, actually my entire 20s. Comic-Con was was a fun place to be, let me tell you. But it's a wonderful time, and now it's such a celebration of everything that we love. It's just it truly is like mainlining happiness. You can't you're grinning from ear to ear the moment you step foot in San Diego, until you leave. Although when you leave, sometimes when you look at your bank account, you can weep. But things are amazing when you go to Comic-Con, and I guess Tallulah and Gilbert might think so as well. But truly, a phenomenal time is had by everyone, and I can't speak enough about Comic-Con. But the funny thing is, another thing about Comic-Con is the experience of Comic-Con is different for everybody. Like, you can design your own Comic-Con. The panels are as great as they ever were. The panels that they have and the people they have on the panels are as robust as they ever were. But I depending on what you're interested in, like if you just go down the anime rabbit hole, or you just are interested in Japanese manga or whatever, that could be your thing, and you could spend 4 days just immersed in that. If you want to go to the Marvel panel in Hall H and see 7,000 people screaming when they announce whatever they're going to announce, you can do that too. But Comic-Con is very different. You can have a very different experience. You can spend your time on the floor shopping the whole time if you want. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody down there. As I said, I'm doing 4 panels. I'm doing our Inglorious Trexperts panel on Star Trek: The Motion Picture tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I think in room AB. So if you want to come down at 3 o'clock and hear the Inglorious Trexperts on that panel, you're welcome to do so. I'm on that panel with, of course, Ashley Miller, again, who wrote Thor and X-Men First Class, with Mark Altman, whose new show Pandora debuted last night on the CW, Darren Doctorman, who's currently working on Star Trek Picard and Westworld Season 3, and of course, Bill Hunt from the Digital Bits, and myself. It'll be a fun time where we get to celebrate all of our favorite Star Trek movies, Star Trek The Motion Picture, because it's its 40th anniversary this year. And then, of course, 17 years ago, in 2002, all my ne'er-do-well friends decided to create what's called Starship Smackdown. If you go, and I can't believe they did this, but in 2011, National Public Radio actually did a story on Starship Smackdown. If you punch in NPR "One Starship to Rule Them All" in Google, you can hear this story. But what Starship Smackdown was we would frequently we would go to Lola's, a restaurant in LA that's no longer there. Every Sunday night, we'd all get together. Everybody was invited. We'd have big groups, and we'd just sit around and chat and talk nerd stuff and eat fine food and drink fine martinis. But a lot of the time, our discussions would devolve into, could an Imperial Star Destroyer destroy the Starship Enterprise? Could it? And so we would have these discussions. So in 2002, we decided as a lark to do this Starship Smackdown panel. And Steve Melching, who's written for many different animated shows you would know, he joined the panel. And just all of our friends, and Kay Rendell, who's written for a number of, most recently Swamp Thing. She's a TV writer. She joined the panel, and we had this panel that we decided we were going to it was going to be made up of spaceshipologists, and that's who we are. And we would debate the merits of starships, and it would be like wrestling. We'd have brackets or the Final Four, basketball, and it was pretty funny. It was basically like a stand-up routine. So it was all about quips and laughing and being funny and all of that. And we thought it was just going to be, it was a lark. We thought we'd do it for fun. Well, it turns out in 2002, when the convention got fan feedback, everyone said the Starship Smackdown got the most positive feedback of all the panels that they had at Comic-Con. So they asked us to come back. And we've been doing it. This will be the 17th year running where we have ended Comic-Con with our Starship Smackdown panel. I think it starts at 2:30 on Sunday. So if you want to come down and you want to experience the Smackdown, you can. It was very funny. One year, I didn't participate in this, but one year they did it at the World Science Fiction Convention. And the people came with like charts and graphs and thought we were like serious. And as an example of things, how does logic work when we're doing Starship Smackdown? All right, say the Enterprise is pitted up against an Imperial Star Destroyer. My logic for why the Enterprise should win is a Star Destroyer is either full. It's commanded by a bunch of stuffy British dudes and full of clones of Tamora Morrison, whereas the Starship Enterprise has hot women in miniskirts. So the Enterprise wins. That would be an argument that I would put forward in Starship SmackDown. But there's like 5 and 6 of us, and we all debate and we all throw out who we want to win. Now, the best thing about Starship SmackDown is, I kid you not, one year Neil deGrasse Tyson came. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. You can actually watch this. There's a clip on YouTube. Neil deGrasse Tyson came to Starship SmackDown. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed that we're doing this goofy thing. But he stayed and watched all of it. And at the end, the Starship Enterprise, the original TOS Enterprise, was pitted against the refit from the motion picture, and it was a tie. So we threw it out to the audience. We said, if there's anyone who wants to make a case either way, Neil deGrasse Tyson stood up and he made a case, an eloquent case for the original Starship Enterprise from the original series. And it was one of those moments where for me, I couldn't believe Neil deGrasse Tyson was at Starship SmackDown. And I still can't believe there were times like there was a woman, she had to have been in her 70s, and she probably came for the first 10 years of Starship SmackDown. And then she stopped coming. So I assume she passed away, but she would always come up every Starship SmackDown is like a comedy routine. It's a 90-minute or 2-hour stand-up comedy routine where we riff. And after 17 years, I'd think the joke has been played out, but apparently it hasn't. Anyway, so that's just my brief summation of Comic-Con, but it really, to me, has been my barometer of the Post-Geek Singularity. Every year, you can sort of take the temperature of the fan community and where we're at. And the one thing that you get at Comic-Con is it is like being wrapped in joy. There is no toxic fandom. People get into arguments, late night at the bar or something, but for the most part, everybody has a smile on their face. Everybody is there to celebrate science fiction, fantasy, and horror in all of its myriad forms. And it is just a wonderful, wonderful time. And I'm looking forward to diving right in tomorrow. As I said, I'm moderating a panel, the Masters of the Web panel, John Campia's panel at the San Diego Library. And then I'm also on Chris Gore's panel a little later that day. Actually, that's on Friday. Tomorrow is Inglorious Trexperts, and then Sunday is Starship SmackDown. So anybody who wants to find me, I'll put up on my Facebook page, I will put up my schedule so people can find me. And if you see me at Comic-Con, if you're there, never hesitate to say hello. I'm wandering around. I might sometimes be in a hurry to get to someplace, but normally I'm just at Comic-Con to talk to people like you. We're all the same. So if you see me at Comic-Con, stop on by. JB Bonifacio is here. He says, I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2012 when they announced Whedon was directing Avengers and the Firefly reunion. Truly the best of times. Have a great SDCC. Well, that was really, I forgot to mention, one of the things that really blew me away is at Comic-Con, I want to say it was in 95, they were promoting the movie Wolf that starred Jack Nicholson, James Spader, and Michelle Pfeiffer, Mike Nichols' movie, Wolf. And Nicholson came to Comic-Con. And I think he realized that after Tim Burton's Batman, that there was this whole audience. And when Jack Nicholson showed up, I was like, okay, a Rubicon has been crossed, because if Jack Nicholson is coming to Comic-Con, the floodgates are going to open. And they did. I've met many different casts of many different shows and movies at Comic-Con, at parties and green rooms. It's been amazing what's happened at Comic-Con. And my favorite Hall H moment was when they announced Avengers Age of Ultron. I mean, I wanted that to be. I loved Ultron, and when they said Age of Ultron, I lost my mind. I thought it was amazing. And that was the year that Tom Hiddleston came out in full Loki garb. It was amazing. I loved it. Anthony DeRiso says, hey, Mr. Burnett, what websites are good for buying t-shirts? I've asked you this before, but lost what I wrote them on. Also, I'm a husky dude like you and was wondering what size and style you get. Well, this is one of the shirts. I always get XLs. And, I weigh probably about 240 right now. I weighed 195 in high school. So I can stand to lose 45 pounds if I got back into high school. I'm 6'1". But the t-shirts I buy are extra large t-shirts, and I buy, and you know, they're starting to fit again, a little loosely the way I like them. I like to swim around in my shirts a little, but this t-shirt, this Wayne Enterprises shirt, the best geek t-shirts I think on the web, the ones I like the most, are a UK company called Last Exit to Nowhere. And what Last Exit to Nowhere does is they sell beautifully designed shirts of basically fictional locations or companies that appear in movies. Like, for instance, they'll have a whole line of Cyberdyne shirts, and they make their shirts in universe. So it's as if the t-shirt came from the movie that you're watching. So this shirt, it's a Wayne Enterprises shirt. Last Exit to Nowhere. I'm a huge fan. I buy a lot of their t-shirts. When I wear them till they run out, till they are worn out, and then I buy more. Anthony also says, thank you for the help and everything you do. I'm a big, and I've been buying a lot of like those pop-up t-shirts on Facebook. They get me. I don't know what algorithms they're using, but there was a Fantastic Planet t-shirt that popped up that I thought was cool, and there was a Main Force Pursuit t-shirt from Mad Max. So things on Facebook. I only buy designs that I think are subtle, though. Like, I don't want a shirt that says 2001: A Space Odyssey on it. I want something that's more. I'll get one with a black t-shirt with just the Hal's lit up eye. I kind of like people, you have to make a little effort. You have to know what you're watching. John Schnepp had a Civic TV shirt that I also think he did get from Last Exit to Nowhere. And Civic TV is, of course, the channel that Max Wren from David Cronenberg's Videodrome works for. And for me, the more obscure t-shirts, the more obscure references, the better. That's the fun of the shirts. Echo Base Network says, are you going to meet up with Gary from Nerdrotic there? He's going to be there. I know Gary has said we should meet up. I don't know where he'll be, but I imagine that we probably will run into each other. I'll be looking out for him. I'm looking forward to meeting Gary from Nerdrotic. John Suntress from the Word Balloon podcast. If you haven't listened to the Word Balloon podcast, I suggest you go. John asks, what are my thoughts on the ways Image changed from 1994? Well, what's interesting, Image Comics is, of course, still around, and they are still a great company producing creator-owned or distributing creator-owned properties. I think what was different from when Image, in 94, Image was, they were like the New England Patriots. They had all these heavy hitters. There was such excitement. There was so much money. I mean, I really saw all those guys as rock stars. Rob Liefeld was starring in Levi's jean commercials. It was crazy. It was a crazy time that comic creators had been elevated, and Image was flush with cash. And back then, comic books were selling, as I said, millions of copies a month. So these guys were stars. I mean, it was like they were a supernova. And I think Image Comics, the entire comic book industry has calmed way down, because this is all, remember, pre-digital. I was still religiously going to the comic book store every week. I mean, I'd get my diamond catalogs and go through, and I was spending ungodly sums of money. I mean, I was dropping, back in the day, I was dropping $200-300 every Wednesday. On action figures or busts or comics, whatever, books, hardcovers, omnibuses. I mean, it was a crazy time. The comic book industry was just ginormous. And what was interesting, as a result of that, all of these investment companies, and this has happened, I've watched this happen so many times, started throwing money at like Broadway comics. Leonard Nimoy was involved with comics. They had all these comic book companies that came out of nowhere, and they threw all this money. Like, Wall Street guys thought, oh yes, comic books are a way to make a ton of money. What a great investment. Look, they're selling these little flippy comic books that they're selling 3 and 4 million copies a month. And it was like a license to print money. Well, what they all learned, and what everybody who every year somebody's trying to jump into the geek space to make their fortune. And every year people fail at doing it, because the people they have in charge don't understand the very market that they want to jump into. They don't understand how it's monetized. I've watched that over and over again. Luckily, Image Comics is still here. Image Comics has rolled with the punches the same way that Boom Studios has, and the way Dark Horse has. And I think that it's been really interesting to watch how comic book publishing has really changed over the last 25 years because of obviously the advent of digital and the fact that younger audiences aren't collecting the way older audiences do. The industry has really changed. But Image back in the day, I mean, it was 5 guys that were all on fire, and it was amazing. It was star-studded. Stubble McShave says, I hope the upcoming Warhammer 40K isn't just spectacle, but focuses on plot and character. I wanted the Space Wolf books adapted, but hopefully it's good. You know, I didn't know much about Warhammer 40K until I was working on Axanar, and Alec Peters, who runs Axanar, who was his idea, the impresario of Axanar, he's a huge, really into 40K. He has many armies and miniatures, and they were all over his office. He was always buying me 40K, the monthly magazines that were coming out, and very interested in Warhammer. And they've announced that former X-Files showrunner, I think it's Frank Spotnitz. Is it Frank Spotnitz? Allow me to check. I think it's Deadline reported that they are now doing a 40K series. And let me get this right. I don't want to get this wrong. Let's see what it says. Still looking. I'm having to go to the next page. I tweeted it. It's on my Twitter feed. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it is Frank Spotnitz. Man in the High Castle creator Frank Spotnitz developing epic fantasy TV series based on Games Workshop's Warhammer 40K. Now, that is a sprawling universe. It's got some really cool stuff in it. And I think, you know, what an interesting way to go. I think that's going to be really, really cool. By the way, as an aside, I just want to read this. Netflix misses Q2 subscriber forecasts, hits revenue target, beats on earnings, but stock dives 13% after hours. Netflix undershot its own guidance for net added subscriptions in the second quarter, blaming its content slate and other variables rather than new competition or U.S. price hikes. Here it begins, ladies and gentlemen. Here it begins. We've talked about it before on the show. But definitely. So 40K is interesting. I haven't read any of the 40K books. The miniatures are very cool. I love the model ships and all that, but I'm sure there's many Warhammer fans that are over the moon about this news. Brian Cruz asks, what's my favorite John Woo movie? Mine's probably Hard Boiled, but Red Cliff is a very close second place. You know, I love Hard Boiled, but I really love The Killer, and I really love Bullet in the Head. But Hard Boiled is great. Better Tomorrow, I like A Better Tomorrow. I mean, it's earlier John Woo, obviously, and Red Cliff is, of course, great too. Great stuff, and I love Face Off. But I'd have to say probably The Killer, because that was the first movie I saw of his, and it blew me away. Oh, Alexander Wilson sends in a super chat saying Netflix has had another bad earnings report. They missed subscription expectations by almost half. What does the future hold for them? Well, Alexander, as we've talked about on the show before, and I've talked about on the John Campea show, I think Netflix is in trouble, to be honest. And they are that's why they're resting on, they're not resting on their laurels, but they need to figure something out, because Disney's going to bury them, and what they're losing is some of their biggest, believe it or not, of course, we've talked about how Friends is being pulled off Netflix, going to other streaming services. The Office is being pulled off Netflix. All of these shows that a lot of their subscribers watch, their favorite shows, are leaving the platform. And I think Netflix is going to hit some very rough waters. If you ask me, I think what's going to happen is that Netflix is going to wind up being bought by somebody else later. Maybe not in the next couple of years, but I could see it. What's going to happen is they can't sustain their business model, and the material that they're creating, their new shows, the way they've promoted things, I think they've really rested on their laurels when it comes to promoting what they do. and I think it was a mistake. We will see what happens. I've got a couple of letters. Actually, I got a lot of letters to read. I'll get to those. Catalin Kit wrote me a letter. Hi, Mr. Burnett. Because you always encourage debates on this platform, and because all of us with different opinions on things are welcome here to do just that, I have to write this letter not as a response, but more as a dire need of asking for clarification on Miss M.E.'s letter. I've got a lot of this about Emmy's letter, by the way, which surprised me. I have to start this letter by saying I'm just a normal guy, but you live in Romania, which is pretty cool. And the only thing that makes me special is it's just me. In my youth, all I wanted to do was play with my friends and watch cartoons. And later, I still love the cartoons, but I've loved more video games and no reading books at all. In college, all I wished was to hang out with the popular kids, but I didn't. I couldn't fit into that stereotype. 20 years later, I don't give a flying rat's ass on that. I understand now that it was my way of trying to be a part of something bigger, and being popular was in some way the thing to be. Nowadays, I do love reading. I just started reading Isaac Asimov, his first books, and I intend to read them all chronologically. That's interesting. The Elijah Bailey robot books, I, Robot, and all that, the Foundation trilogy. The books are awesome. Anyway, enough of this intro. Before I lose my thoughts, I have to start with really big kudos for Miss Emmy's letter. It's a very well-written letter, and I'm on board with all you said. I'm not joking. You started by saying that her letter is an explanation on why she loves... Oh, wait. You're now addressing Emmy directly. I have to start with a really big kudos for Miss Emmy's letter. It's a very well-written letter, and I'm on board with everything Emmy said. He's not joking. Emmy started by saying that her letter is an explanation on why she loves Discovery, and this caught my attention because I, too, love to hear new perspectives on this series. Personally, I did not enjoy the show, probably because I've seen other older series, and they've resonated more with me. In saying that, my expectations were high. You can find one of the letters concerning this aspect on the Burnettwork.net. It's called Another Trip Down the Star Trek Discovery Rabbit Hole. Maybe you can put some perspective in my analysis since you like the series. I must say that your letter is very well written, not like mine, so well written that you almost entirely avoid the main topic. Let me get this right. You love Star Trek Discovery because of two inspiring quotes from Pike in Season 2, a Season 2 where they desperately tried to reel back the series on the original track and failed less miserably than the first season. I don't want to be rough or impolite, but trying to make a series more like older ones doesn't mean implicitly that they didn't do a good job in the first. But doesn't that mean implicitly that they didn't do a good job in the first place? And going off topic here, can someone please enlighten me on the episode where Leland gets infected with the nanites and says struggle is pointless, which sounds just like the Borg greeting, resistance is futile? Are they implying that he is the Borg? Dear Lord. I don't intend or want to overanalyze your letter, but I fail to see or understand why you do like Discovery. I mean, your reasons besides the uplifting quotes. I ask this not because I don't like the series and try in any manner to impose my beliefs, but in understanding your point of view, I could better understand things about mine as well. I apologize in advance if I sounded harsh regarding your letter, Emmy. Best regards. That comes from Catalin Kit. Well, Catalin, and I loved Emmy's letter too. A lot of people have sent me that same criticism, that Emmy's letter did not necessarily address the many different points directly why she loved Discovery. I thought it was really implicit in her letter that she was talking about her life and what kind of a person she was. And I drew that line between what she was saying as a person, why Discovery appealed to her. Because, you know, I watched Star Trek. My point was that we all watch Star Trek differently. And I think that the Discovery series hit ME on more of an emotional and heartfelt way. And it's not just about representation or inclusion, but I think that was part of it. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And yet the way I love Star Trek is a little different than that. But a lot of people wrote to me that Emmy's letter didn't do a very good job of explaining why she loved the series, whereas I looked at her whole letter as sort of a metaphor of why the series appealed to her. But I understand that. Maybe she'll write in and clarify her thoughts. I know I would love to read anything more she chooses to write. So that is I don't think you're wrong about that. And a lot of people did write me. So you're not the only one, but that's a great letter. And thanks once again. I love that you send me letters from Romania. This one is another letter from Chris Rigglesworth, and I love this letter because it applies absolutely to COMICON. Dear Rob, hope all is well in your world. I hope I'm not being a pest by writing so soon, but once again, something from the show sparked a memory from my youth. A couple of days ago, I heard you mention hanging out in a V shuttlecraft while you were at Warner Brothers. You lucky dog. It's true. When I was at Warner Brothers 30 years ago, the crafts from the miniseries V, the alien fighters, or their shuttles that they went to and from their motherships from, those full scale ships were just hanging out in the scene dock, because that's what happens. I mean, there used to be, it's not there anymore, a giant area where they had flats from sets and stuff, and they had two full scale V shuttles. Nobody cared about them. I knew what they were. I'd go take people out. Anytime somebody came by the studio to visit, I would always take them there. That was my rounds. That was definitely part of them, because you could just walk inside them, and they were pretty cool, and they were in really good shape too. I was always like, why doesn't somebody like take these somewhere? V to me is what Star Trek is to you. From the very beginning, the show got its hooks into me. In my 9-year-old mind, it made sense. Aliens would need giant ships to traverse the great distances in space. They would need landing craft instead of beaming. They had a good reason for coming to Earth, to save their own dying planet. The aliens were everywhere, but little was revealed about them because they had sinister agendas to rob us of all of our natural resources, enslave the human race for labor and soldiers, and yes, for food. They used trickery and deception to achieve their goals, reptilian humanoids who disguised themselves to look human in an attempt to gain our trust. They had weird voices, snappy uniforms, and stylish sunglasses, which were necessary as their sun was a different colored star. The show contained strong Cold War elements of communism and Nazi Germany reflected in the writing. There were political factions and ideologies within the alien and human societies that forced characters to choose a side, either to promote their own gain or just survive. I watched the initial run of the miniseries, and thank God for the invention of the VCR, which we finally had when it re-aired to promote the show being made into a weekly series. I now could watch it over and over and over, which I did, of course. Eventually, there were novels which came out every month. The best were written by Howard Weinstein and the late A.C. Crispin, author of my favorite Star Trek novels, Yesterday's Sun and Sarek. But I read them all with a thirst that couldn't be quenched. Later, DC did a run of comics, and there were trading cards and an action figure. I still have my action figure and the entire run of the comics. I got everything I could get my grubby little hands on. You can only imagine my disappointment when that show was canceled after one season. In hindsight, I think I can see where the cracks in the armor started. First, with the changing of creator Kenneth Johnson's vision to where he ultimately removed himself from the property, later to the studio slashing the budget for the series, down to where the alien voices were changed without explanation, I might add, continuously reusing stock footage of the Skyfighters and often rehashing the same story from week to week. V was still a great concept for a show, and when we got the reboot in 2009, I was hopeful. There was a great cast, and the production budget seemed to be there, even a little fan service with casting Mark Singer and the ageless Jane Badler in season 2. Unfortunately, I could never figure out where they were going with the reboot. I don't think the writers could either. And it only got 2 seasons before the plug was again pulled. I know Kenneth Johnson has repeatedly tried to get V restarted, most recently with Desilu, but apparently they have run into legal issues, and once again, the show has been shelved. To me, V is primed for another reboot. I really believe it deserves another chance. As with Star Trek, it needs to have writers and a showrunner who are true fans of the material and know where to take it. In a world where I can dream, if I won the Powerball, I'd be looking to finance a pilot of a new version for Mr. Johnson to present to Amazon or Netflix right after I buy a full visitor uniform and prop replica laser pistol. Rob, when you were at Warner Brothers, did you ever pick up any stories or inside knowledge about V? I would love to hear yours or other members of the Post-Geek Singularity's thoughts on it and its chances for a reimagining. Hope you have a fantastic time at Comic-Con. Take care, Chris. P.S. If perchance you see any cosplayers dressed as visitors, give them a thumbs up for me. Well, first of all, Mr. Wrigglesworth, I don't know if you've heard the news, but Warner Archive announced that they are releasing the first V miniseries on Blu-ray. And they're actually having a panel at Comic-Con, a V panel at this year's Comic-Con, which is one of the great things about Comic-Con. Now, I don't know who's on the V panel at Comic-Con, but maybe Kenneth Johnson is. And I wondered, you didn't mention, hey, whoa, dude, what is up with you? That was really loud. That was really, really loud. You didn't mention Kenneth Johnson wrote a V novel, which, as a matter of fact, which I have his V novel, and I read it. was actually pretty good. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good, and he wrote it himself. So I'm going to, just for the viewers out there, let's see. There it is, Kenneth Johnson V. And it was called V, the Second Generation. It actually has 3.5 stars, and it came out in 2008. So it came out before the reboot. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I also have the, is it 10 discs? I think it is, or maybe it's 5 discs. The Japanese boxed set of the laser discs of both miniseries, which are very cool because there's all this artwork in this set. And, I kept a lot of my laser discs, including the V box set. I'm a huge V fan. I was hugely impressionable when I watched. I was a little older. I was 15, 16 when it aired in 83. I don't remember exactly when. I was either 15 or 16, and I of course loved it because of the Nazi allegory, and I thought it was tremendous. And I too collected anything. They had the one figure, the lizard figure, and he was the friendly, the father of the V baby, which is basically that's what the figure looked like. It had a human face and the sunglasses, and you could take the face off, and it became the lizard creature, and you could just stick its tongue out. But the costume was really cool, and I actually had 2 figures, and I would display one with the head on and one with the head off. I love those. And of course, I have the DC Comics and the Japanese Laserdisc set, and they released both miniseries. Of course, Warner Brothers did on DVD. Now, I don't remember the preferred aspect ratio. It was broadcast in 4:3 originally, but the Blu-ray, like I think the DVDs, was 1:7:8. And unlike the incredibly disappointing From the Earth to the Moon release, look, I understand what HBO was trying to do with their release of From the Earth to the Moon on Blu-ray, but it was really disappointing. And I knew it was going to be disappointing because the first thing I did was watch their restoration feature. And when they were talking about doing the film negative, they weren't talking about the aspect ratio. They didn't address the fact that it was originally 4:3, and they cropped the 4:3 image down to 1:7:8 to 1, which is crazy. Star Trek: The Next Generation was 4:3, but that was what it was protected for. Maybe that's what they did with, of course, From the Earth to the Moon, but not impressed at all with what HBO put out. And they didn't have anybody involved with the original production of From the Earth to the Moon in the restoration featurette, which leads me to believe the whole thing was done on the cheap. And all in all, a crushing disappointment. Even the special effects look not much up from Saturday morning cartoons, and very disappointing. It's nice to have it. I'll still watch it because the live action footage I still really enjoy From the Earth to the Moon. But they're doing the V panel at COMICON, and they're releasing it on Blu-ray, and I'm very excited because Warner Archive, their bit rates are higher than normal Warner releases, and I bet it's going to look spectacular. And I'm sure they have I don't know if they remastered it for sound, if the DVDs were just 2-channel stereo mixes, or maybe they were mono, but I bet they're going to remaster it because that would be awesome. That would be really good if they did. But it's funny that you sent me that letter, Chris, because V at Comic-Con this year, another reason why you have to love Comic-Con. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, why is the second season of Star Trek, the animated series, only 6 episodes? Did they pull the plug on the show early? They did. There's only 22 episodes of the animated series of Star Trek, unfortunately, although it did win a Children's Emmy Award for excellence. It's too bad. I just think, the show, like the original series, was probably too cerebral for Saturday morning cartoon, the cartoon crowd, but I did like it. It's a bummer. But it did spawn a great series of books. Alan Dean Foster did publish his Star Trek log series where he adapted. First, he was doing like 3 episodes a book, but then it got to the point where imagine a whole novel written based on 1 episode of the animated series. That's what happened, and I really enjoyed the Star Trek log series, and I love the animated series. There's a new book coming out by Aaron Harvey, one of my friends, a guy I know, who actually had a heart transplant, and he wrote a book. It's a nice coffee table book coming out about the history of the animated series that I recommend everybody pick up. It's probably on Amazon, but it's pretty bitchin' that he wrote that. I can't wait to get it. Trond Michelson says, I was on vacation in San Diego in 2001. Saw ads for the San Diego Comic-Con and just walked in and got day passes. Had a blast. Shame it sells out so early these days. Yeah, it's, it just would fill up. They have only a certain amount of people that they can get in, and they keep trying to move it. They want to move it to places that have larger convention facilities, such as Vegas and even Los Angeles. But the problem is, it takes away half of the experience of Comic-Con. Is not just the convention, but if you go, it's San Diego itself, and I would hate it. I would hate it. But you used to be able to just walk in, but over the last, certainly I would say starting in the late aughts, 2008, it just became a big problem. I mean, I have to prove my professional credentials every 3 years to get my professional badge. I get a professional badge for free, which is nice. But every 3 years, you have to send in your credentials. I mean, I'm waiting. Like, have I done enough this year? I don't know. But I'll send those in August. I have to send in my credentials for Comic-Con 2020 in August, so next month. Koba's here. Hello, Koba. Love when Koba's here. Koba says, Star Destroyer versus Galactica 2004. That is a matchup that has happened many times. The Battlestar Galactica, the original Galactica versus the new Galactica has also been something that has happened. And I'm a big fan of the Galactica, especially the 2004 Galactica and the Pegasus. Those are very formidable ships. So, yes. Willow Yang says she's starting the next generation tonight. Can't wait. Not only can you not wait, well, we here at the Post-Geek Singularity community can't wait because, man, I want to hear what you think of Encounter at Farpoint. That's the pilot episode. That was the episode that launched the series. By the way, if you're watching it streaming, they've broken up. I don't know if you've seen if they have Encounter at Farpoint streaming as one. They broke it up into 2 episodes. But remember, when you watch it, if you have Encounter at Farpoint, it aired as one episode, one 90-minute episode. And I would also encourage you, if you want, to get the Blu-rays, because my documentary on the 90-minute documentary I did on the making of the first season is pretty great, if I do say so myself. JB Bonifacio says there's a Blue Harvest t-shirt on the Last Exit site. Wow. Told you. I told you. There are pretty great t-shirts there. I think my favorite one I got recently was the Joy shirt, about Joy from Blade Runner 2049. I love the colors of it. It's a great shirt. Dan V900 says the first issue of Blade Runner 2019 came out today from a screenwriter of Blade Runner 2049 and Logan. I liked it, but I thought it was promoted poorly. Well, that's a bummer. I will pick that up in San Diego. I'd love to read that. Actually, I'll probably wait and get the hardcover collection of it, because that's how I do it. But it was good. That's pretty awesome. Wade O'Neill. Thanks for the support, Wade. Appreciate that. Wade O'Neill says, maybe it's because I'm an accountant. While I enjoyed the X-Men comics and 90s cartoon, how could they afford the Danger Room, Cerebro, the Blackbird, etc.? None of the X-Men have jobs. Is Charles rocking Tony Stark income? I think Charles is. I mean, obviously, it was sort of always insinuated that he was from a very, very wealthy family. We sort of saw that in the movies. But yes, I was just assumed that Charles Xavier was wealthy. But who knows? This next letter comes from David Miller. Hi, Robert. Hope all is well. Here's an observation from a fellow Trekkie. I feel like I've been watching Trek my whole life, but as we get older, we can see these episodes from a different perspective. Perhaps to be Tyr is to see in new ways. As I've started watching these episodes differently, it's lent new depths and context to them. Let's look at Bread and Circuses. That is a second season episode, I believe. So who is the hero of this story? I'd have to say it's Flavius Maximus. Think about it. He repeatedly thinks about the well-being of our 3 leads before his own welfare. He risks his life more than once for them. He is truly the Batman of Counter-Earth here, or whatever it was called. I think in the novels and the comics they called it Nova Roma. I think it's called Nova Roma. So when he sacrifices himself to save Kirk, and make no mistake, it was a sacrifice, it is truly heartbreaking. Indeed, watching Flavius's death scene kind of chokes me up now. But Flavius is not only a physical hero, but a philosophical one as well. He's also a Christian, which is interesting. When Kirk says, "You keep on believing, Flavius, all men are brothers." Despite appearances, it is Flavius who is the teacher here. So Flavius is the hero, but who goes on the hero's journey? Well, that would be Captain Merrick. Merrick actually has a character arc. He starts out as a piece of shit, clearly beyond redemption, yet somehow pulls it off in the only way he could. What's so effective about Merrick's redemption is that it totally took me by surprise when I first saw it. I couldn't believe I was watching Merrick die with a smile on his face. And how much of a part did the proconsul play in Merrick's conversion with all his aspersions about Merrick's manliness? These two were great, well-developed characters whose story gets buried beneath the flash of our more familiar leads. Kirk and company are the nominal heroes, but Flavius is the true hero. If you try and watch it from their point of view, it's almost like getting 2 new episodes. Well, this is just me sharing again. You may think I'm overthinking the piece, but I'm glad I have someplace to share these thoughts. David Miller. David Miller, let me tell you, buddy, you were correct about that, because I think Bread and Circuses is one of the great... When I was a kid, I kind of liked it because I always loved seeing the end when they're fighting in the arena, the TV show arena. I love to see McCoy wielding a gladius. You know, I was into it. I loved it. But it wasn't one of my favorites. But as I've grown older, like you, I think Bread and Circuses is one of the finest episodes of the original series. I really do. I think that episode is great. And as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate it far, far, far more. So I am right there with you, sir. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm with you. And everybody should watch Bread and Circuses again. Rob Meister General. This, by the way, this comes from Ian Samuels. Rob Meister General. It's been argued that 2001: A Space Odyssey was not only groundbreaking, but came before its time. But it is not alone. A number of films and TV series came before their time, and some of these works of great visionaries failed. One of my favorite TV series when I was young was Sapphire and Steel, starring David McCallum and Joanna Lumley, about time agents fixing broken parts of time, often when someone has been interfering. I loved it. I love the characters, the concept that time agents are elementals and each have their own particular talents. It was groundbreaking TV, but it didn't do well. I believe if Sapphire and Steel was made now, it has the chance of success. A film that was before its time was the much maligned sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Shock Treatment. The premise in Shock Treatment is that the town of Denton has become the subject of a reality TV series more than 15 years before Big Brother graced our screens. I like the film and I enjoy the musical numbers. Of course, it is not the first to use this premise. One of the first to use this premise of reality TV was TV writer extraordinaire Nigel Neal's 1968 The Year of the Sex Olympics, which follows television producers trying to find ways to keep the viewing public interested to distract them from the horrors of the post-apocalyptic world they live in. Man, I've never even heard of that Nigel Neal show, and I love Nigel Neal's Quatermass movies. The Year of the Sex Olympics, I got to look that up. What other films and TV series do you think came before their time? Well, first of all, Ian, this is a great letter. I loved Sapphire and Steel, but, you know, I didn't see it until later because you obviously live in the UK, I would imagine. Oh, you do. At least your Yahoo address is from the UK. So we didn't get Sapphire and Steel here in the United States. I don't think I saw it until I saw it on video in like the 80s. Deep, deep, deep into the 80s. It was one of those shows that I read about. I'm like, I got to watch this. I really like Sapphire and Steel. I cannot go with you, though, on Shock Treatment. Now, to be honest, of all, I've walked out on one movie in my life, and that was Shock Treatment. I found it interminable. I hate movies that are trying to be campy. I hated it so much. I can't even tell you how much I hated it. But admittedly, I only saw half of it, and I walked out, and that's the only time I've ever seen it. I should probably go back and revisit it again just to see what it was like. But I didn't do that. So I can't go with you there. But, you know, a TV series that I dearly love, and I think it was way before its time, was Wise Guy. Stephen J. Cannell's Wise Guy, which is, of course, about a man named Vinny Terranova who gets recruited by OCB, Jonathan Banks from Better Call Saul, and, of course, Breaking Bad fame. Jonathan Banks is his boss. And Vinny Terranova, he was given a a false identity. He had to go into prison to establish it. And he was an undercover operative that would infiltrate criminal organizations and try and take them down. And I thought that show was way ahead of its time. It's serialized storytelling. The first season of Wise Guy is so good. So good. You've got the Ray Sharkey storyline, and of course, Kevin Spacey. I first saw Kevin Spacey in the delicious Joan Severance and the Mel and Susan Prophet storyline. And Ray Sharkey, so good. So there were 2 long serialized stories being told in the first season of Wise Guy that I dearly, dearly loved. It only ran 3 seasons, but it really, you look back on it now, and it was such a groundbreaking show based on its premise and its format. So Wise Guy, if you haven't seen Wise Guy, unfortunately, what's really sad about Wise Guy is in the second season, they did a long episode about this record company, Dead Dog Records. Paul Winfield was in it. Glenn Fry was in it. Debbie Harry. It was Debbie, I think, or maybe not Debbie Harry. She might not have been in it, but it was about a record company, and they had all this music that they did not secure the rights to for home video. So when they finally released Wise Guy on home video, you cannot get those Dead Dog Records episodes, which is, I mean, that's just a damn shame. And it would be nice to see Wise Guy released on home video properly with the entire series, when they didn't have to swap out music and indeed torpedo those episodes from ever seeing the light of day. Real bummer. So that's the show that first comes to mind when I think about how groundbreaking it is. And in terms of movies, I don't know. There's so many movies that were I just can't think of anything right now that I would throw out there that people don't already know. But Wise Guy was the first thing that came to mind. An interesting topic. I want to thank you for writing in, because that's, anytime you bring up Sapphire and Steel, that's a good thing. This is a letter from somebody I don't recognize. This comes from Crosstalk. I think Crosstalk, this is the first time I've received a letter from Crosstalk. Crosstalk says, "Hey, Rob, I've been a lurker on your site for a while, and rarely do I participate in the chats, but occasionally I do. Been a fan of yours since I saw Free Enterprise at my local indie theater up here in Edmonton in 98, might have been 99. I believe it was indeed in the winter of 99. We played at I have to tell you, I went to Edmonton, and it had to have been at the local Heroes Film Festival that you saw the movie at. And when Free Enterprise was playing up at Edmonton, it was playing on a double bill, and the movie, the Americanization of Emily with, oh my God, with Julie Andrews and Rockford, Jim Rockford, who plays Rockford. And it was directed by Arthur Hiller, and Arthur Hiller was there. I got to meet Arthur Hiller. So yeah, I loved Edmonton. Loved your shopping mall. Edmonton was great. In any case, I think I remember you mentioning something about our current overly politically correct climate starting to turn on itself and seep into other areas of media, entertainment, and movies, comics, etc. If you didn't, I apologize, but I'll give my thoughts anyhow. No, I have. I didn't think much of it again until I was rewatching The Next Generation after 15 years, and I saw the season 4 Next Generation episode, The Drumhead. Just wow. It is just as relevant today as when it aired, and retroactively back to World War II, regarding the blood ties to nations we were at conflict with at the time and the imprisoning of those people. It is quite simply timeless. The idea that truth and evidence no longer matter and give way to fear or public outcry and virtue signaling. Picard stands up to Admiral Satie after she starts a witch hunt against a crew member who lied about his lineage and said his grandfather or father, I can't remember now, I think it was his grandfather, was Vulcan when in fact he was Romulan. Picard issues a formal complaint, but Admiral Satie persists in her unshakable quest to find enemies where there are none. She proceeds to try and discredit Picard, or at least provoke him into a reaction to prove him incompetent. She tries to pin his so-called incompetency on being assimilated by the Borg, and tries to pin the loss of life at Wolf 359 on him. And his reply is some of the best writing I've ever seen in television, and his acting was on point as well. With the first link, the chain is forged, the first speech censored, the first thought forbidden. The first freedom denied chains us all irrevocably. The first time any man's freedom is trodden on, we are all damaged. I abbreviated the speech a bit, but I think I got most of it. It's a great speech, and that's one of my favorite moments in all of The Next Generation. This reply was simply masterful and still widely relevant today. What with mob justice and guilty before being proven, but guilty before the burden of proof that seems to happen online, especially in social media circles, people do not wait for evidence or use critical thinking and multiple sources to verify information before making a conclusion anymore. Everything is played to emotional responses to provoke fear, it seems. I get that humans are irrational and emotional beings, but the one major attribute that separates us from the entirety of the animal kingdom is our ability to reason. Picard uses this spellbindingly well and provokes out of the Admiral exactly what she was hoping to provoke from him. An emotional overreaction because the words he used to disarm the attack on his integrity was in fact the Admiral's father's words. His final thoughts on how eternal vigilance is the price of freedom just stays with you. So good. This episode has now moved well into my top 10 Trek episodes of all time from the writing alone. It is so enticing that I had to look up who wrote the episode, and I shouldn't have been surprised that it was Jerry Taylor. I've seen her name around Trek, but never paid a lot of attention. My mistake. She also co-created Voyager, by the way, and wrote 2 canonical Voyager Star Trek novels. I aim to rectify this, and I'm going to rewatch all the episodes of Trek involving her in the writing credits to start with and grab 1 or 2 of the Trek books she wrote. My favorite Trek episodes will always be the DS9 episode in the Pale Moonlight and the original series Doomsday Machine. However, this episode definitely left an impression that will last. Anyway, Rob, just a couple of thoughts from randomly watching some TNG episodes again after a long hiatus of not rewatching. Keep up the great work, and greetings from the great white north. Well, Crosstalk, thank you for that. Look, that's one of the things that's so great about being an imagination connoisseur is that you go back and you watch these things that you've loved and you rediscover that you were not wrong in loving them in the first place. And that's, I think, Gilbert, of course, there are landscapers here, so he's coming and barking at me. Perhaps I haven't given him a cookie on this show live. Gilbert, would you like a cookie? I'll give you a cookie. Oh, see, then here comes Tallulah. I was going to try and get Gilbert to come up. Are you going to come up, Gilbert? Here, look. Come up here. There you go, buddy. You haven't been on camera in a long time. Huh? What do you think about that? Oh, yes. Here, buddy. Yeah, is that good? People have missed you, buddy. They haven't seen Gilbert. Yeah. I love you. No, but you got to let your sister have a cookie now, too. Here, Tallulah gets a cookie. No, you don't get a third cookie. Come on. What's up, bro? You want another cookie? Okay, that's it. And now your sister gets a cookie. You got 2 more than her. So, hey, there you go. Don't be greedy. Good boy, brother. Here, brother. Okay. No more cookies. I'm running out of cookies. I got to make another Amazon order. Okay, you got to get down now. Get down. Good boy. Okay, well, there you go. There's Gilbert and Tallulah for you guys today. So, yes, it's great when you're an imagination connoisseur and you rediscover what you love. And I think the Drumhead is, in fact, exactly what's happening. I mean, it's so strange. If you guys, Terry, moderator Terry, talked about year after year, or years and years, I think it's year after year, the new show that's now airing on HBO that came from Russell Davies, who, of course, wrote Torchwood and Doctor Who, and he's written so many other great television shows. It's a series that charts basically 15 years in the history of future Britain. And it's very subtle, and not so subtle, but it deals with what's going on right now and where we might be in 15 years. And oh my God. But it deals with all of these kinds of cultural things that are swirling around us. I just don't know why everyone's taking their leave of common sense. I guess everyone is so full of piss and vinegar when they think that they can go out there and right wrongs and change the world by pillaring people on social media. I do think we've seen a lot of great things happen, a lot of protesters, a lot of people come out. They can use social media to organize things. But yes, it's never good. This mob justice that social media has given rise to is not a good thing. And it's a little bit, frankly, it's a little bit frightening. A little bit frightening. And to that end, we have Mark C here. Mark Chure is here. And Mark C dropped, I guess, like an 80-pound roll of wire or some kind of cable on his foot. He sent me pictures. He sent me pictures of his foot, man, and he didn't break anything, but oof, they had to pull out a blood clot out of his foot, man. It was harsh. But this is a letter from Mark C. Greetings, Notorious R&B. Sorry I have not participated with the group. Between an unbelievable foot injury and Tropical Storm Barry, life has been interesting. I wanted to thank Jacob Fudge for his letter the other week. I think it was probably the most insightful letter regarding the culture war I've seen. As I've mentioned, think more, feel less. Taking in Jacob's letter and the conversation dealing with ScarJo, I have one thing to say: stunt casting. I've never believed that a cabal of studio heads got together to push a social justice warrior agenda. I think the fan backlash to what's going on in Hollywood is due to two things. First, I think it's a misunderstanding of the current market. You see, I don't know that the geek singularity is completely a real thing. Sure, there's a more diverse group of people who look at the geek genres and think of them as more acceptable. I've seen two other forms of entertainment take notice of this, and along with some pressure of leftist radicals that came with this new group, change the entire landscape of the medium to conform. The problem is both the radicals and a large majority of those diverse groups are only passively interested. They don't buy the product. Through that process of change, the base that has supported the medium, cis white males, have been driven off or have found that what made the medium entertaining to them has been removed and they walk away. I've seen it cripple the gaming industry, and the comic book market is decimated to the point I give it less than 10 years before Marvel and DC either fold up shop or have to completely restructure due to the collapse of the direct market. Now it's at Hollywood's doorstep. Since studios own the news media and both seem to have decided to use diverse stunt casting to create a fracture in fandom, the news media gets to use this to create their own news to report, and film and television use it as a sort of free promotion. Make no mistake, Hollywood, I truly believe, is following a path of self-destruction. I've seen it twice before. I know, Rob, you've said it hasn't hurt their bottom line. My response is it hasn't hurt their bottom line yet. But I look at this summer, except for the end of Marvel's Thanos saga, every other film is either underperformed, disappointed, or bombed. Think Star Wars is okay? December will tell. My point is, film, and by the way, big, huge reshoots, not just pickups, huge reshoots have begun on episode 9, and they're going to be going through September. That is a long time to reshoot. And to me, that's a restructuring or a rejiggering of what they've done. They've seen that whatever they did not quite work, and they are reshooting for at least 6 weeks, which is a lot. Actually, probably 2 full months. That's 60 days. Most movies that aren't effects heavy shoot in less time. A 60-day reshoot schedule is massive. So I don't know what that means. But I look at this summer, and at the end of Marvel's Thanos saga, every other film is either underperformed, disappointed, or bombed. Think Star Wars is okay? December will tell. My point is, film like games and comics are fueled by disposable income. And as good as it is to see new and different faces in the genre of entertainment, there are not enough of them who are hardcore to replace your demographic base group. So we are changing entertainment for a new base that doesn't really exist. Not enough to justify changing what makes genres special and losing that base. If it hasn't cost movie studios money yet, it will. I hope Hollywood discovers this sooner than comic books have. Live long and prosper. P.S. Rob, if you want to know more about my foot injury, check your DMs. Oh, I check my DMs, Steve. Stephen C. They're harsh, but luckily you didn't break anything. But they're pretty cool, actually. I love gory photos, and those are good ones. Those delivered the goods. Well, this is a very interesting letter. I don't think you're wrong. I think what's happening. Look, I know from my chats, 97% of the people that listen to my live chats are male. I have known from working in the genre industry for a long time that predominantly the audience, especially in America, was a male audience. It didn't really start to change the demographics until really the 90s. Now, I used to have conversations with Amy Dallin on Heroes, and she would always say, because Amy I understand where she was coming from. She works in a comic, I don't know if she still does, but she worked at a comic book store, and she's a genre fan herself, and she would say things. There's always been women involved in genre fandom. And I'm like, yes, it's true. But you know what? You just did not have equal amounts of women scouring boxes, long boxes of old comic books. And that just never happened. It still doesn't happen. And for whatever reason, men were attracted to that kind of material in much larger numbers than women. Now, that has changed, but I still think that, like, certainly the comic book industry, it didn't change that much. And I think if you look at the actual demographics in terms of this country, for instance, Black Americans, what are 14 or 15% of the country? And look, I get that. And eventually there's going to be, we all are living through, I've talked about this, we're all living through an evolutionary time where via social media, we're all figuring out there's more inclusion and more voices. And a lot of the voices that the new voices that we're getting, people that were marginalized before, are certainly overcompensating when they get in to make sure that they're never not heard from again. And I totally understand that. And I'm all for that. But it is disheartening. Like, for instance, this controversy over Lashana Lynch playing 007 on my feed was full of just idiots. And I'm going to say idiots. They're like, oh my God, James Bond is a white or black woman. I'm like, no. Within the context of the story, James Bond 007 has retired to Jamaica, and a new 007 played by Lashana Lynch has taken the place of James Bond, has taken over his license to kill in MI6. Now, in my mind, okay. I mean, predominantly the James Bond era, the Daniel Craig era of James Bond is about James Bond getting older. We saw the beginning of his career. I don't think we saw enough Bond movies where James Bond was just James Bond. We went right from Casino Royale, where he became Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. He was a newly minted 00. And then in Skyfall, he's moping and he's missed a step. There was no 10 movies in between or maybe there were, we just didn't see them. And so Bond went from being a newly minted 00 in the first two movies to being a mopey, old, sad sack in the last two movies, which I think that was the problem. And the fact that he's retired after 4 movies and he does his 5th movie and I'm retired now, and they gave someone else his 00 is fine. I think it's great. Lashana Lynch, I like her. I like the way she looks. If she can kick some ass, if she's like La Femme Nikita and she enjoys having a license to kill, I think that's awesome. And also England has a different relationship with a lot of their minorities. They hated other minorities more than they hated Black people the way we in America enslaved them. They got rid of slavery. In the 80s, I remember seeing My Beautiful Laundrette, and I didn't understand that there was racism against Pakistanis in Britain. I'm like, I didn't know much about Pakistanis at all. I'm like, wait a minute, Pakistan and India are next to each other. Like, why would you not like Pakistanis? I remember seeing that movie going, I don't get it. But you know what? It just proves that everybody is racist against, it just depends. Go to any country in the world, they hate somebody. I mean, I've never understood racism. It doesn't, I mean, I understand it, but I don't get it. I can't internalize it. I always go back to the beautiful women defense. There's beautiful women of every color on this planet. And if that's the case, why would you want to discriminate against anybody? Just go meet the beautiful girls. And if you're gay, meet beautiful boys, why not do that? I mean, I'm not saying that you only have to be beautiful. You can meet people of, like I said, all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds. My taste in women varies wildly across all different spectrums. So that's not what I was trying to say. But my point is that there are people all over the world that are cool. Who cares what color anybody is? I know we're not evolved enough to feel that way, but that's the way I feel. Like, I don't care. If I like somebody, I like somebody. It doesn't matter what color they are. But I get it. I mean, now we are pushing a progressive leftist agenda, especially in our more liberal. The arts have always been traditionally liberal. You kind of have to have a liberal mindset to even want to become an artist, because what is being liberal about is about being open to new ideas. And artists have to be, if nothing else, open to new ideas. That's what being an artist is. I think the very idea of wanting to be an artist is sort of a liberal belief. And I consider myself classically liberal, although I think it's become bastardized and crazed. I used to think I was also a progressive lefty. Not after what I've been seeing from, especially in academia, but from the progressive far left. They're insane. It doesn't make any sense to me. Once I start hearing that free speech should be banned, I'm like, get out of town, man. Get away from me. Leftist identity politics did nobody any favors. How many millions of people died because of it? Scary stuff. But yes, I do think that again, by pushing an agenda, look, it's the Burnett axiom. Never put your universe before your characters and stories. Well, the same is true of never put your agenda before your characters and stories, because you're going to lose. You'll lose every time. And you can't win that battle. There's no way you can win that battle. Nobody wants to be hit over the head with their didactic storytelling. You know, it's tell good stories. If you want to have an agenda buried in there, look, even Twilight Zone, my beloved Twilight Zone. I go back and I watch The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. That episode is so heavy-handed because the message was so front and center. And not that Twilight Zone was always the subtlest thing in the world, but still, I do not like agenda-driven stories. A great story's agenda becomes self-evident as you experience the story. It doesn't have to beat you over the head with it. That's just bad writing. That's Kirk helping the Yangs and the Combs understand the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, whatever. I don't like it, but you're right. I mean, I think a progressive agenda, while I believe in inclusion, I think that if you look at your demographics, if I started just talking about a progressive identity politics agenda on this show, I would lose a lot of my viewers, but I would also turn off. I would just lose a lot of my viewers, but that's not what I'm about. Look, everybody knows I'm a fan of people. Anybody who watches this show, I like people. I like people of all kinds, of all colors, of all sexualities and beliefs and genders or what have you. As long as, those people, that's not how they're identifying themselves first and foremost. I don't get up in the morning out of my bed and go, I am a straight cis male. And the counter argument to that would be like, well, you've never had to feel that way because you live in a world of privilege. And I'm like, it depends. I didn't feel that way when I was in South Korea. But I think when I get up in the morning, I think, what am I going to do today? How am I going to make this day better? How am I going to make this day better for myself and my fellow imagination connoisseurs? What can I do? And I think this idea of tribalism, and it's killing everything. This idea that certain art shouldn't be made, that we can't address certain issues, and that let's pillory somebody because of hearsay. And it doesn't matter if they've been exonerated by 2 states, allegations about something that happened 25 years ago made by an estranged wife, an angry wife. Yeah, they should just be believed. I don't know. It's a crazy time, man. I agree with you. No one is ever going to make money trying to pander to, you're never going to make good entertainment trying to pander to identity politics. You must remember the Burnett axiom. Do not put your universe, or I'll add to it, or your agenda before your characters and your stories. I really believe that. Let's see who else is. What are you guys saying? Well, there must be more. There is more. Wow. There's a lot. This is a long chat. So John Suntress from Word Balloon Podcast is back again. He says, most esoteric Saturday AM cartoon, Planet of the Apes. Weird and slow. The Planet of the Apes cartoon is indeed weird. Now, I hadn't caught up with it in a while, but back on the DVD days, they released like a Caesar head. Like you could get a whole bust of Caesar. It was like a 1-to-1 life-size bust of Caesar. And in the back, it had the slot where the DVD box came out of. And I used to have that. I sold mine. But it also came with the animated series in that box set. And man, I watched that animated series. And I didn't remember it much when I was a kid. I love the Mego figures, though. And man, like you said, that was a weird cartoon show. If you guys want to watch, if you like Planet of the Apes, sample the Planet of the Apes animated series because it's pretty wacky. Echo Base Network says Game of Thrones got the most Emmy nominations for HBO, so it's good. That means nothing. It does not change my mind that episodes 3 through 8 were garbage, in my opinion, and it was the worst season. Thoughts? I was not a fan. I thought season 8 of Game of Thrones turned out really, really well. The first couple of episodes, I loved them. I thought the latter half of Game of Thrones was almost as big an audience betrayal as that of Lost's final season, and I did not understand it. To be honest, I thought it negated everything that came beforehand. the series started with the White Walkers from the very first episode, and the fact that they were vanquished and you don't really understand what were they doing, why were they there, what was the motivation. Everyone's like, it doesn't matter. They were just the undead. I'm like, no, because stories are also about meaning and metaphor and all of those things. And I felt like they didn't really know what the White Walkers were all about. They never figured out what they meant or what they were doing. Is winter is coming? Always, winter is coming was always a metaphoric statement. But I guess, oh no, it's just winter. That's all it meant. And I feel that with the White Walkers, that's all we got. And there were things that I thought that we were building up. For instance, I wanted to see a season-long struggle between Lena Headey, between Cersei, and between Daenerys. This idea that Daenerys was destined to go mad is stupid to me. It's not necessarily in their bloodline that everybody who aspired to be king was suddenly going to go crazy. Not every Targaryen suffered from mental illness. And Daenerys, when she went through her whole arc was about she had to accept this mantle of leadership that she probably would never have received if not what had happened in the show happened. And then, of course, being the mother of dragons, and she had to sort of, it wasn't that she was a mad king or anything like that. She was trying to deal with, how do you lead in a land like Westeros? How do you deal with it? And she made mistakes, and sure, she was brutal, but she was the breaker of chains. And I wanted to see where, if her destiny was just to go crazy and burn up King's Landing, I would not have, who would have cared? Why would you even have watched anything that happened? Because none of it matters if you know that she's just going to go crazy and burn up King's Landing and get killed by Jon Snow. It's like, that isn't the end of a story. That doesn't tell us anything. That doesn't leave us anything to ponder. In my mind, that's bad storytelling. What should have happened is that once Daenerys Targaryen, at least in my mind, got to Westeros proper or whatever, that's when the real Game of Thrones started. I mean, she's been in the Bush Leagues working her way up, and now she's here for the main event, the title bout. And it would have been really interesting to see what would have happened between Cersei and Daenerys when their leadership styles came into play. How would Cersei keep King's Landing if everybody hated her and she needed to muster her troops and she was only paying for the Golden Army? Where was the Iron Bank? I thought it was a complete and utter letdown. Season 8 was a complete, utter letdown. I know some people liked it, but from a storytelling standpoint, the whole thing left me cold. I'm like, why did I watch this show? The show is so good. You go back and you watch any episode from seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you watch it and you're like, wow, I forgot how good this show really was. And you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, what is the point? What am I supposed to take away from the Game of Thrones? And I think it was almost as if the story had no ending. I didn't just feel it was unsatisfying. I felt there was no ending. They didn't, all of the things that they're commentating on all the way when they get there. And there are some people like, oh, it's what you didn't get it. Yeah, I got it. And it was very, very disappointing. I didn't think it was just a bad season of television. I actually thought it diminished the rest of the season, the rest of the show, the rest of the entire 8 years. I think what it needed was a Return of the King ending where you had all these things come into play, and nothing that happened in season 8 was at all satisfying with anyone. I mean, there was the Lord of Light. Was there really a Lord of Light? Why was he spared? Why was our character able to come back from the dead? Like, none of those things were answered. It was just like, whatever. And it really bothered me. So I was not a fan of what they did in season 8 of Game of Thrones. I think it actually diminished everything, but that's just me. Jerome Morgan says, will you be posting anything on here or Facebook while you're at the con? Yes, I'm going to do broadcasts, hopefully daily. I don't know exactly when. Like tomorrow, I won't be able to do one until the late afternoon or evening, but I don't know, because moderator Mike Bodden is going to actually be at the con, and I'm hoping to broadcast from his hotel room. Stubble McShave says, Game of Thrones Emmy knobs have been met with a shoulder shrug. I know. I mean, I don't think season 8 was their best work by a long shot, unfortunately. ME is here. ME sent in something. ME says, once I was better acquainted with psychedelics. I finally grasped by 2001: A Space Odyssey, so challenges and tickles the psyche. The last 1/3 is a trip. It certainly is. It certainly is. But I also think it conveys, as far as a movie can convey this, the infinitude of the universe, and the reason why things take as long as they take. I'm a huge fan of 2001, and by God, does that 4K disc look amazing. Victory Unlimited Show is here. Victory Unlimited Show says, as a lifelong comic book fan, it saddens me that the industry is so small. What do you think the future of comics is? Is it still hard to copy digital? Is it still hard copy? Got it. What is the future of comics? Is it still hard copy, digital streaming, combined packaging with movies, or what? Well, unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of changes in media. I actually heard from a reliable source that even Shout Factory, who puts out Blu-rays, thinks it's got 2 or 3 years left, that physical media were there. And I tweeted a couple weeks ago, I said the state of physical media is like the war between the Klingons and the Federation in yesterday's Enterprise. It's going far worse than anybody really knows, than has been reported. And I think that's true. I think we live in these rapidly changing times. And I just think that the comic book, the weekly comic book or the monthly comic book is not long for this world, or it's going to go almost predominantly digital. I haven't bought comics for years. I buy the omnibuses, and I mean, a lot of people don't buy those. I just love books. I still love hardcover books. I like the smell of the paper. I like the feeling of them in my hand. But even I realize that that's kind of irrational when you can get a tablet and watch something, whether it's a Kindle or whatever. I just think that those things that we've grown up with, they're totems, really. I think that they're just going to go away. Things are going to change. We're going to have things that are different. And I just think that the comic book medium and physical media of all kinds is going to go into the digital realm, because, you have to store all of this stuff. You have to move it around. It becomes clutter. Even though I love the idea of going to the comic book store and buying comics and bringing home my stack and reading them. I love that. I did that for 30 years. And it was fantastic. Now I want to get rid of all those books. I mean, I've got a garage full of, what do I have, 65 or 70 long boxes of comics. I go through them and I hate them. I hate my comic book collection. They're not organized as much as they should be. I don't know where anything is. I just want to pull out like my favorite 100 issues, get them all graded and put them on the wall. I really do. I don't know. It bums me out. I mean, I know that physical media is not, look, it's not going to exist. Because how are you going to get movies? Nobody's going to want to have those things anymore. I like them. They're from a different era. I got Fast Color, which is kind of like a superhero movie that nobody's seen. But who even knows what this is? And they're certainly not going to buy it. I mean, I bought it. I even tweeted to the director. He was saying, my movie came out. I'm like, here, I took a picture of myself yesterday. A selfie, tweeted it. And I wanted to say, like, dude, I'm doing my part. I'm buying your indie superhero movie, well, superhero-esque movie. And I just think that those days, they're gone. I think comics are going to be digital only. And it's sort of interesting because this is weird. Follow me on this. Part of the reason, and this is going to seem so irrational, but here I will let you into part of how I think, part of my psyche. Not that I don't all day long, but I am prejudicial. I have a prejudice against digital comics, and I have a prejudice against them because comics to me are drawn on paper. This isn't even true anymore. So this is crazy for me to say this, but in my mind, I see, comics on the way they would do them on there was a format that somebody is drawing comics by hand on paper. So I should be reading them on paper. I know that so many comic artists now are finishing their work digitally. Colorists certainly are. It's all digital files. I mean, I've known this. I self-published a comic book 15 years ago and knew this. But in my mind, it's a paper format. You can't. That's part of the reason I don't want to ever watch. I don't have a Kindle. I like books. And it's so stupid. It's such a stupid thing in my own mind. But I believe that I mean, what? And people would say that, well, if you took that your logic to its conclusion, you shouldn't want to watch movies. Please, Gilbert, don't bark. You shouldn't want to watch movies unless you're seeing celluloid. Why would you watch digital versions of films? I'm like, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I feel like a comic book should be read on paper. If that makes, I just do, and I hate the fact it's all going to go away. But I get it. What are you going to do with all that paper? We need more trees anyway. I read Swedish scientists are saying if we plant like 7 trillion trees or something, literally 7 trillion trees will stop global warming. I don't know. It's bad. I'm just an idiot. Jerome Morgan says, have you had the chance to see the movie Shinobi from 2005? I have not. It fulfilled my ninja cravings. I can't believe this one passed me by. I've heard of Shinobi. I know of Shinobi. Obviously, I know the video game, but I have not seen the film, and I'd like to see it though. I've heard it. Echo-Based Network says his letter made sense. I guess you're meaning Mark C's letter. That's why Comicsgate creators are exploding. Ethan Van Sciver alone has brought in $1 million on his Cyberfrog comic. Look, I agree. I agree. I think there's a lot of people that are disenfranchised. I think there's a lot of people that are angry. But I'm sorry. I also think that there is a lot of racism and misogyny in the world. I'm not saying that everybody who's part of Comicsgate is that way, but like what Mark C is saying, the large majority of the comic book audience, as Mark put it, are white cis males. My problem with that is that I think that more than ever, we need to have a diversity of opinion. That's what we're lacking. And the problem is we see that the diversity in culture is somehow going to, and by the way, it's going to. The fact is we're in an evolutionary period. The pendulum is swung one way. It's going to swing back another. It will eventually calm down. We're just going to live for the rest of my life, for the next 20 or 30 or 50 years in a very tumultuous place where a lot of marginalized people are getting more and more voices, and they should, because if nothing else, their opinions and perspectives are only going to enhance our storytelling landscape in the long run. We might not see it now, and we white cis males might fear it now, but in the long run, once this all calms down and people aren't so agenda driven, and we go back to telling great stories about great characters rather than push our agendas, and that will happen because people will get sick of it. Didactic storytelling is never going to work for very long. So, yeah. And there's a huge voice out there. Unfortunately, I think that the problem is that insular voice, when everybody's just talking to each other and they believe all the same things. You need diversity of opinion. You need, and we need to keep, what we're forgetting how to do is talk to each other. That's what I see being eliminated, is the ability, the baseline that we're all human beings. We all breathe the same air. We all want to love our kids. We all want to be able to provide for our families. We all want to have a decent place to live. We all want to have a little bit of luxury time where we have enough scratch in our wallets to go see movies. We're all ultimately the same. And this constant, we've been doing it for 100,000 years. We've been othering each other, finding reasons to hate each other. Oh, your skin's darker. I hate you. You're inferior. You're a woman. You have to, menstruate, or you have to give birth. You're not as good as me. I'm not going to, all of that thinking has to go away. It has to go away, and hopefully we'll evolve somehow. I mean, we haven't in 100,000 years, clearly, but I'd like to see it happen, because all of these people's opinions, everybody has value. Every person you meet has a story to tell you haven't heard, and the fact is we're not thinking in those kinds of terms. We're trying to be too exclusionary when we should be inclusionary, but we shouldn't be so agenda driven that we're compromising our own stories in order to facilitate other people's. When other people's viewpoints become more important than the idea of sharing everyone's viewpoint, we're in trouble there too. You cannot trade one oppression for another. That doesn't work. We all have to move forward together, because oppression's gone on too long. There's unless you decide that, okay, we are all going to move forward together and figure out how to work together and talk to each other, we're never gonna get it right. We're never gonna get it right. And I'll tell you something, the divisive nature of the politics in this country has stagnated our growth. This is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. It's the 17th of July today. In 3 days, 50th anniversary of the moon landing. The last time we went to the moon was in 1972. Not because it is easy, but because it was hard. I mean, we have to start having collective dreams together. When I say collective, I mean the whole country, not certain people. We need to figure that out. Like Yuval Harari says, what is it we want as a species? And, I think we've got to figure out a way. I want to go to the stars, man. I'm not going to get there, but I would like to get there. I'd like to be part of a group that's going to go to the stars, all of us. Hopefully we'll take lots of different colored people with lots of different stories about their lives, because going into space is going to be long and boring. So the more people that have more stories to tell, bring it on. JB Bonifacio says, when I die, I want Benioff and Wise at my funeral so they can let me down one more time. Look, Weiss and Benioff also were responsible for the previous seasons of Game of Thrones, and they did a heck of a job. They did a heck of a job. And they had an impossible task, and don't just because they didn't stick the landing doesn't mean they didn't give us some incredible television for almost a decade. So they deserve your respect. Aaron H says, sending a super chat for perfectly synthesizing my opinion on Game of Thrones. Well done, good sir. Lena Headey got an Emmy nom for staring out a window. Man, that was so lame what they did to her. So lame what they did to her. And you are right. Yeah, she was looking out a window. It bummed me out. Bummed me out. That reminds me, somebody said they sent in a super chat to me, and I missed the super chat. And I'm looking for it, but I don't see it. No, I don't think I missed one recently. Maybe it was a couple days ago. AJ Lancaster says there's nothing like new comic book smell. I agree with you, but I still love that comic book smell, but ever since they went to like glossy paper, it doesn't smell the same. Although I love the smell of paper and printing and all of that. I think it's great. I do love it so. Here's another letter from Jerry Kelly. Hi, Robert. I hope you're well. I'll come straight to the point. I've just launched a Twitter and Facebook campaign to get Paramount to give us what we all want. Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition in 4K. Anything you can do to assist would be great. The 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture is coming out on December 6th, 2019. Oh, I'm aware. And if you're aware and you want to be more aware, and you're at the San Diego Comic-Con, tomorrow at 3 in rooms A and B in the convention center, you can come hear a Inglorious Trexperts podcast be recorded live. And our subject is Star Trek The Motion Picture and its 40th anniversary. There's a tremendous demand for this product. Paramount Movies, Paramount Picks, Star Trek, and then he gives a bunch of hashtags, make this happen. Okay, I'll read these hashtags because I want them to happen. At Paramount Movies, at Paramount Picks, at Star Trek, hashtag STTMP40. Please make this happen. I pretty much follow all you do. Hope you can help. My very best wishes, Jerry. Jerry, sir, there is nothing else I want more than a 4K remaster of Star Trek The Motion Picture. The problem is, I would say, just off the top of my head, to do that correctly, to really get in and do exactly what you really need, and to make that 4K restoration. And by the way, I'd put it in IMAX as well. It would be for IMAX theaters. I would need $10 million. Now, you could probably do it cheaper, but really, if you had $10 million, you could do it the way it was supposed to be done. Now, 2001 was re-released to theaters. It didn't do great theatrically. I think it made like 3 or 4 million theatrically, but the value of having a 4K restoration of Star Trek The Motion Picture, especially the director's cut, marvelous. And they put it in theaters. I think if they did a 40th anniversary and you did that restoration, now, I think it could actually be very viable. I think Paramount has a Star Trek movie they could get out. Unfortunately, where's that 10 million going to come from? There's nobody at Paramount that actually can greenlight that kind of cash. I mean, they could, but not really. The home video departments of all the studios have been gutted. They're handled now by people that don't really know what they're doing, nor do they have a history in home video. So there's really nobody to go to. I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to Jim Giannopoulos, who runs Paramount. Sent it to him about this very thing. I said, dude, you could have a Star Trek movie in the theaters on December 7th. which is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek the Motion Picture, and you should do it. There's a team waiting. Darren Doctorman, one of my dear friends who oversaw the visual effects. I think that, you really need there needs to be somebody not just that worked with like Mancino and Dave Fine and Darren. What you really need is you need somebody like a Christopher Nolan to oversee the process. You really need somebody who loves Star Trek the Motion Picture to oversee the process, because I do think that there were things done in the director's cut that could be further refined, and I don't know. You really need to get a filmmaker in there, a director. And I know that Robert Wise oversaw everything, but I think that more work could be done. But I would like nothing more than to see Star Trek the Motion Picture restored into 4K and that director's cut as well. As a matter of fact, do the original theatrical and the director's cut, but get that director's cut to come out and release it theatrically and put it in IMAX. I'm all about that. I absolutely would love it if that happened. Here is another letter that deals with some of the topics we've been addressing today. This comes from Tony Washburn. Rob, Destiny Captain here. I'm catching up with a few of the recent streams this morning while I walk. Currently, I'm on the Mulan episode. You are reading a letter from a listener that is commenting on a recent Nerdrotic video. One thing that keeps bugging me about some of these letters is the assumptions made by viewers about the political affiliations of various controversial YouTube channels. People keep saying things like, the folks on the other side of the aisle. Well, I say that too, so I'm guilty of that. Here's the conclusions I've been able to draw based on what I've heard these programmers actually say over the dozens, if not hundreds of videos. Gary at Nerdrotic is not conservative. He's not a Republican. He gives no craps about both sides of the aisle, and he has said so many, many times. Tom and Rob from Midnight's Edge are not Republicans or conservatives. They have both made repeated statements that I would characterize as liberal. They have criticized Trump on more than one occasion. Mecca Random is not conservative or Republican. From everything I've ever heard her say, she's apolitical. I have no idea where Andre sits. He sits in Norway. He generally doesn't make political statements either way. Jeremy over at Geeks and Gamers is a conservative Republican. He makes that abundantly clear. However, he has many people that provide content for the channel and work on the website that are not. He staunchly defends their rights to have their own opinions and even disagree with him. Ultimately, I think what's happening here is that anyone that is seen as criticizing going woke or social justice warriors' agendas in media are getting lumped in with the right by association. It's an easy and frankly lazy line of thought. The reality here is that these YouTubers are far more nuanced in their thinking. Some are absolutely on the right. Others are absolutely not. That's it for today. That comes from Tony Washburn. Tony, great letter. And I'm totally with you. I appear on Midnight's Edge and people have criticized. I wasn't even aware. Before I even knew the guys at Midnight's Edge and Andre and Rob and Tom and Mecca Random, I wasn't that aware of Midnight's Edge. I just watched their speculative Star Trek videos and appreciated the production value that went into them. And then when I started talking to those guys, I thought they were cool. I mean, I liked them. We all share the same interest in Star Trek. And the fact that they've ever been branded alt-right is, I think you're right. I mean, they're absolutely not. And I totally agree with you that Jeremy over at Geeks and Gamers, he makes no bones about what he believes. Now, and I've always come out and said I've really enjoyed Nerdrotic. I like Gary Beekler's take on things. And I think, what's funny is, I'm trying to create an environment where we can all be here and share things. And in doing that, I'll go off on Star Trek Discovery. But I also try and temper my points of view with an industry perspective. And I understand, hey, it's not show friends, it's show business. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Because I am a working industry professional, and I try and be mindful of that when I'm talking. But I also know how the industry does work. And I do think sometimes when people are going off on, as much as I might have been disappointed by the season 8 of Game of Thrones, as any of the actors will tell you, they didn't work any less hard on it, nor did any of the technicians that worked on Game of Thrones. As a matter of fact, they busted their asses. At the end of the day, the people in television, it's the showrunners that really know what they're going for. I don't think, and the actors can't step in and go, well, I'm not really happy with where my character is going. Could you please rewrite it? They can't do that. I think that we saw on numerous occasions that the actors in various interviews, they were aware that they didn't really like where some of them wound up, but they can't say anything. That's completely, if an actor says something like that, that's so out of line. And the work that is done on a show like Game of Thrones, hundreds and hundreds of people make that stuff happen, and they're trying to make it good. So when we come out and we pillory everybody, and we don't take into consideration that's why I put the blame on Star Trek squarely on the showrunners and producers of the show who are making the creative decisions. The head writers on the show are the ones that I blame. And if unfortunately, Weiss and Benioff, I think they just went in a direction they thought was correct. I think they just went in the wrong direction. They also have been bringing us the show for 8 years, so I'm not going to say that, oh, those jerk-offs, they deprived me of, they actually did deprive me of wanting to go back and watch the show again, because knowing, and I think that's a big problem. I think knowing that the show had no satisfying thematic ending other than people were reading into the fact that, oh, Daenerys Targaryen was always going to go crazy. No, I don't think that was ever part of Game of Thrones. I don't think she was ever destined to go crazy because what, her father did? Her father was the Mad King, so to all Targaryens go crazy? That was never shown. Well, she was always going to be... No, the whole point is that she was juggling the situation that she was put in. And the question is, would she wind up being a despot, or would she actually turn out to be somebody that could be a good queen and rule? Well, we'll never know. I mean, I think what they did, I think they betrayed her entire arc by doing what they did to Daenerys Targaryen. But I blame Weiss and Benioff. It was just a bad choice. But, I mean, the way certain channels like Gary, listening to him, I watched all of his rants about Game of Thrones, and I think that the way these channels can sometimes treat people or treat their subject matter can put people off. And I do think that there is a lot of misogyny that is on display. And I think that there is a lot, unfortunately, geeky guys have a certain history with certain things, and genre fans, male genre fans, don't have a really good track record, and I would like to see less misogyny all around. This is a nice letter. Well, sort of. I mean, I think the sentiment is very nice. This comes from Cinema Gulp. Hi, Robert. I've been a fan of yours since the Collider days. That show has changed drastically since the days of you and Schnepp. Yes, it'll be a week. In a week, at the end of this week, it'll be a year since Schnepp passed. So I'm thinking about that. Obviously, he officially passed away when I was doing John Campia's. I heard the word when I was doing John Campia's panel a year ago. On the same Friday, I'll be doing a panel with him this year. With the anniversary of his passing approaching, I thought I'd ask you some sort of an intimate question. As a kid, my father and I used to enjoy comedies together. The one we watched the most was the Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss cult classic, What About Bob? Yes, that movie. I love What About Bob, but did I have to hear about it in my life. My dad has recently been diagnosed with stage 4 bladder cancer. I'm sorry to hear that. With him living in Arizona and myself in Southern California, we only got limited amounts of time to see each other, and each time I see him, I see how it is starting to overtake him very rapidly. I recently went out there for Father's Day, and I made a movie review on my YouTube channel for What About Bob as his Father's Day gift. What a cool gift. Needless to say, we both laughed and cried while watching it. That was our movie that we used to share. I've always loved my dad's laugh. My question to you is, do you have or did you ever have a film that you and a friend or other loved one shared together that has remained a bonding experience? Perhaps even you and Schnepp shared an experience over a film that reminds you of him. Thank you so much for allowing me the space to ask this question. Keep up the great work growing the Post-Geek Singularity. What a lovely letter, by the way, Cinema. I'm sorry to hear about your father. I'm sure what you did was very much appreciated by him. My friend Sean, who Patrick Van Horn portrayed in Free Enterprise, he is no longer here. And of all the people that I've known in my life, he and I bonded over movies the most. And we were always throwing movie quotes out to one another. And some of the movies that we really bonded over, for whatever reason, Basic Instinct and To Live and Die in LA. I know that seems sort of strange and also Star Trek, but Sean and I, I miss him every day. He died in 2011. And for a long time, for 20 years, we were peas in a pod, but we were attracted to movies that had something, either bad guys or bad girls or a combination of the two. But Basic Instinct, we would constantly quote that movie to each other. Yeah, it's funny. I think about that. I mean, all the time. I mean, I love Basic Instinct. I have my quarter scale Catherine Trammell from Basic Instinct right here. You can't see her, but she's looking right down at me, asking me if I've ever fucked on cocaine. But that's what Sean would always say. Or it was funny. I got to meet Leilani Sorrell, the actress Leilani Sorrell, because of Femme Fatales at Comic-Con. I got to meet her at Comic-Con. We had a dinner for people that were involved in Femme Fatales, and she was there. And I got to tell her about how we used to quote her character from Basic Instinct. She plays Roxy. And that was another fun time I had at Comic-Con. It was great because I was directing episodes of Femme Fatales, and she was an actress in a Femme Fatale episode. So by me saying that I was a director, I directed 5 episodes of the series, she had to listen to me. And it was great. And we bonded, and she was terrific. Big fan of Leilani Sorrell's, but Sean would have loved to have met her at Comic-Con. It's Roxy. She's my friend. Yeah, but he's gone. And all prayers to your father, and I hope you get to see him as much as you can before maybe he can beat it. I don't know. But as much time as you can spend with him, spend that time with him, because it won't come around again, obviously. And I miss my dad every day. So yeah. And this brings me to my last letter for the day. This comes from Craig Stratton. Craig Stratton says, "Hello again from the UK, Rob. I've noticed a lot of talks recently about why Hollywood doesn't make original movies anymore. The answer, I feel, is simple. Because no one goes out to watch them anymore." And I see the best evidence of this in the year 2018, because, Rob, in this year, there were 2 movies released, one based on an existing property and the other completely original. I'm talking about Venom and Upgrade. I use these 2 movies as an example because of how similar they are to each other. Both about a guy who gets enhanced power and fighting skills from an outside source, an alien parasite or cybernetic implants. The guy hears voices in his head that come from his newfound friend, and stars 2 guys who look very much like each other. Now, I enjoyed both of these movies very much. However, I will say I feel Upgrade was the better of the 2. And judging by critic and audience scores, quite a few people did. However, Venom made $855 million, while Upgrade made only $16.6 million. I know other factors that may have put Upgrade at a disadvantage, like it being rated R while Venom was PG-13. But even so, I do wonder if the team behind Upgrade had made Venom and made it exactly like Upgrade while only replacing the character names and changing the cybernetic implant for the symbiote Venom, would the movie have done better simply by being about Venom and not an original movie? Well, Craig, great letter, sir. And I think you nailed it. You just explained exactly in your short letter, very succinctly, why Hollywood does not make original movies. Why, it's not that Hollywood doesn't, I should say studios don't. Lee Wanell, who directed Upgrade, who's now directing The Invisible Man, was able to bring that movie in for a price. But still, I think that movie should have made a lot more money. But the problem is, with a low-budget film, they just don't spend the kind of money they need to get the awareness up that movie exists. I think that they could have, through proper marketing, they could have pushed that movie and it could have made $100 million, maybe. But I believe Upgrade was a Blumhouse film, so they released it through Universal, and the fact it got a theatrical release was a miracle. But it's true, nobody went and saw it. And I think for various reasons, this is a theory that I think is true, that bear with me. Well, you need to create, that's easy. You need to create a must-see factor in your audience. And I think one of the things that's been missing from movie marketing is most of the people who are marketing movies are copying how everybody else has marketed films. When you see trailers, when you see campaigns, there's not a whole lot of original movie marketing going on. Sometimes there is, but for the most part, it's all cookie cutter. And there's no innovative marketing happening. And I think that's the problem. I think that the marketing departments that have enormous sway now in the studios, the marketing departments, like so many other departments in Hollywood, there's no more vision anymore because no one can afford to have a vision, because if they fail and a movie, the marketing departments, if they fail, look, to me, the fact that Upgrade failed is a failure of the marketing department. They just didn't know how to create or instill this intellectual desire that they have to see. People have to see this movie. And I think that's what it's all about. You have to create an intellectual desire within people that they have to see the film. And you do that by creating, like Upgrade, the whole idea of it, if all of us would want an upgrade, that's how you market the film. You market the film by positing this intellectual conceit. What if you could be upgraded? And figure out a way to, give you that hook. And now we're going to show you what might happen. Upgrade should be wish fulfillment for the audience. Don't just tell us what it is. Tell us what it can mean. And you've got to innovate and do something interesting. And a lot of the time they're able to do that. But for the most part, that's asking marketing people to think out of the box. And that's what we need more of. And you're right. This is why studios are only making tentpole properties from previously existing IPs, because no one is going to see something that's new. This is, every studio can say, that's a perfect example you've used, Craig's Upgrade or Venom. Basically, you're absolutely right. Same movie. Why should anybody go see a movie like Upgrade when they can see Venom? And I would say because Upgrade was really good. Upgrade was a really good movie that deserved to be seen. I liked it. I bought it. And I think it's a bummer. Wind Goddess is here. Wind Goddess sent me in some chats, and that was very nice of you, Wind Goddess, but didn't answer or didn't ask a question. So Wind Goddess, I like your name, by the way. Thank you for supporting the channel in that way. And once again, Victory Unlimited is here. Victory Unlimited asks, Victory Unlimited has a statement to make. The mystery of a racist fandom. It always amazes me how some of the most racist sci-fi fans can love imagery, red, blue, and green space aliens, but somehow hate people of varying hues right down here on Earth. I'm going to read that again. It always amazes me how some of the most racist sci-fi fans can love imaginary red, blue, and green space aliens, but somehow hate people of varying hues right down here on Earth. I don't get it. I thought, as I grew older, I believed that reading science fiction novels and watching science fiction shows and reading comic books, if you like science fiction, fantasy, and horror as a genre, and you're a big fan of it, I did not understand that racism could even exist within that framework. Oh, how wrong I was. If anybody knows what happened with the Hugo Awards and the sad and rabid puppies, that shit freaked me out. It really did. Apparently it freaked Tallulah out too. Freaked me out. And I don't understand Victory Unlimited. I don't get it either. I'm like, how do you love speculative fiction? How do you watch science fiction, fantasy, and horror and not like? I would think that would make people like people of different races, cultures, creeds, because you learn so much from them. I mean, to me, in my mind, whenever I meet somebody from like a different part of the world, in my mind, I'm like, ooh, it's like the closest thing I'm going to come to meet an alien from a different world. And I love that. I get really excited when I meet somebody from a foreign country or who might not speak English very well, or I see it as how it's like Captain Dathon from from Darmok. How am I going to talk with him? I mean, we're not going to speak in metaphor, but if she or he can't speak my language, we can communicate through pictograms or something. I mean, I've always been that way. When I went to college, I loved talking to exchange students that couldn't speak much English and find out how I could talk to them through like pop culture, you know? And I've always thought that racism just astonishes me. It's very weird. It's very weird. But then you realize that you think, at least I thought that I'm not saying I'm the most intelligent person in the world, but I'm always very inquisitive. And to me, I've always thought of the world globally. I guess I've always thought of, because I've thought of our planet, even as a kid, our planet. So for me, I always wanted to see the rest of our planet and meet people from everywhere. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's strange. I ask myself that question all the time. I don't get it. I've met racist Star Trek fans, and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I've told people that my first crush was Nichelle Nichols, and I didn't even understand that, like, she was black when I was a kid. I didn't have any black friends. That's why I thought Lieutenant Uhura was so beautiful and cool, because I didn't know anyone that looked like her. And it wasn't until I think I've told the story, I was around 9 or 10 when I encountered racism. I'm like, have you guys seen Mirror Mirror? Have you watched how she rocks those green hoop earrings? I mean, come on. She's a beautiful woman. I just didn't get it. And as I've gotten older, I've encountered more and more racism in my life. I mean, I understand it. I do. I understand it. Even being raised a Jew, I've seen people hate Hasidic Jews more than they're like, oh, you're a Reformed Jew, you're okay, but those Hasidic Jews are crazy. Or what about those Orthodox Jews? And I'm like, oh, so you've got ranges of Jews that you hate. It's so weird. The whole thing is just bizarre. As I've always said, at the end of the day, when the Martians are invading and their heat rays are flying overhead, it doesn't matter what color the humans are next to you that are sitting in the foxholes trying to evade those weapons, because we're all humans. Or at least something like that. But at any rate, I'm going to bring this chat to an end. What a great rollicking bunch of letters and opinions today. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank everybody for participating, all you imagination connoisseurs, all you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. If you see me at the San Diego Comic-Con, please say hello, come up to me, and don't feel bashful or shy. That's what I'm there for. I want to thank everybody who supports the channel through super chats or through donating at the website, theburnettwork.net. I want to thank everybody for writing letters. Keep those letters coming. I want to thank my moderators, Terry, Greg, Jim, Detective Jim, and the Honorable Mayor Bodden, who should be in San Diego by now, I would imagine, which is fantastic. Come visit us. I'll be hanging out at artist Dave Dorman's booth. I'm sure Mike Bodden will be at Dave Dorman's booth a lot. I don't know which booth it is, but Dave Dorman, the Star Wars artist of many other things. Mike Bodden is going to have copies of The Wasted Lands, his pulp magazine with stories and Dave Dorman artwork. You can come get the first edition at Dave Dorman's booth. Check that out. It's pretty cool. And I'm going to bring this chat to an end. And I just want to say, remember, I'll say it again, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you all, I say this always, but I'm going to say it again. I say, have a better day.